Okay, thank you very much. Hope you had an exciting day. I certainly have. We're going to end the day today by doing an experiment together. This is not a talk. We're going to do something together, live, right here, right now. That involves that you need to pick up your phone, and in a second there's going to be a QR code up on this screen. You scan that QR code, that will take you to a survey. That survey has 15 questions. They might seem a bit weird, a bit random. They might make you laugh. They might remind you of math homework you had as a kid. Doesn't really matter. Answer as good as you can, as fast as you can. And to help you a little bit, so we don't spend 10 minutes on this, if you see an hourglass popping up, that means you're spending a little bit too much time on that one question. Okay, so then we'll do something together afterwards when you've filled this in. So here you go, scan the QR code, and let's see what happens. Oh, is this slow? It is using AWS. So if it's slow, it's not my fault. It's Amazon who has problems today. But let's see. I can see many people are working for it, so. So I can hear from the chatter that it's not working for a lot of you. That's AWS's fault, but I can see that it's working for at least a couple of hundred of you. So let's let them finish, and then we'll continue. Okay, I can see quite a lot of people have finished actually, so I might continue without everybody finishing just because I see it's very slow. That's the bad part of putting everything into these US-based services. If something falls down, everything falls down. I'm sure you've seen in the news today that most web services are down. Amazon Web Services are struggling. This includes this little experiment here. But let's try and see, because we spend too much time on this. So the reason why I'm here today is because just over 2 years ago, I was in Palestine. And I went down to Palestine to inform my own opinions about this conflict, to learn about what is happening down there, and to talk to people on both sides of the wall. And I formed my own opinions, and I came home with the conclusion that it's not the old white men that will solve this conflict, it's the next generation. And then what we all know happened just a couple of weeks after I came home. And then if I truly believe that it's the next generation that can solve this, I have to do something about the next generation. So I volunteered as a teacher. And I'm now a teacher for 15-year-olds through the Humane Society in Norway, trying to make the next generation more tolerant, open, curious, and understanding to try to prevent these conflicts in the future. And I made this experiment for my students. And it was a huge success there, so I took it to my workplace, and it was an even bigger success there, and I realized that this works for pretty much everyone. Because there's no doubt in 2025, critical thinking has never been more important. But to know how to think critically, you first have to know how you think. How does your brain work? We've all seen these, oh man. See, my presentation is also in AWS. This is fun. Let's see. Here we go. We've seen these optical illusions, right? Which line is longer? The lower one seems to be longer than the other one, but in fact, they're just as long. These are optical illusions. They're very well known, but they're not as common. It's not that often that you see an optical illusion. An optical illusion tricks your eyes. But there is such a thing as a cognitive illusion that doesn't trick your eyes, it tricks your brain. It's not as well known, but it's much, much, much more common. And I think that is a clue to this secret ingredient that is fucking up your decisions and your research and how you develop your products. And I have now, hopefully, done a magic trick on at least some of you. Unfortunately, it didn't work for all of you, technically, but I hope I've done it for the people who managed to finish it. Because what you didn't know is that when you scanned that QR code, I split you into 2 random groups. And I tried to influence the answers to these groups to answer something, and the other group to answer something else on the same question. And now we're going to see if I was able to predict the answers to the questions by knowing this secret ingredient. And that's usually very, very fun. So let's see if I was able to do. So the people who actually managed to scan it got the first question was, how tall is the tallest redwood tree in the world? Tallest tree in the world. And I divided it in 2 groups. I wanted one group to answer a very low number, and the other group to answer a very high number. And now, if this works, let's see the median result from the low group. That was 63 meters, and the high group was 180 meters. I asked the same question to everyone, but I managed to influence you with 186%. That's statistically significant, right? That's much more than it would be if it was random. I clearly was inside of your brain, pushing some buttons, influencing you, manipulating you in some way. The question is, how did I do that? So everybody got the same questions, but with one small detail and difference. Just like these dots, your brain sees them as a bunch of dots. When I tell you that one of them is smaller than the other one, you will see it pretty quickly. I'll make it move, and you will definitely see it. And that's kind of what I did to your brain right there. Because before I asked you about how tall a tree is, I also asked you if you thought it was more or less than 50 meters if you were in the low group, or 370 meters if you were in the high group. That number was the only difference between those 2 groups. So how I phrased my first question influenced the answer in the second question with 186%. One number was the only difference. In psychology, this is called the anchoring effect. And this happens because when you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to, or a difficult question, you clutch at straws. And I gave you a plausible straw with a high or low number. And then I asked you to be specific, and then you stayed in that area that I gave you in the beginning. And this happens all the time when we do user research. When you talk to users and customers, you get false positive results back because you said something that anchored the brains of the people you talk to. Maybe you didn't even mean to do that, but you just did it, and it happened, and it affected the results that you got back. It's really, really strong psychological effects. And there's an example from research about this, where they gathered a bunch of highly experienced judges who read the same description of a woman who was caught stealing. And then they divided the judges in two groups and gave them 2 die each. The judges didn't know that the die were loaded, so they always landed on a 3 or a 6. So one of the groups of judges saw the number 6 in front of them, and the other group saw the number 9 in front of them. And then they asked them, how long should this woman go to prison? And the answer was different. These are professional people, highly experienced in a professional context, sending a human being to prison, and they still fall for this anchoring effect. It's incredibly strong bias in the human brain. So here's the first takeaway from this little experiment that you can take home with you. When you're out talking to users and customers, please shut the fuck up. Shut up. Everything you say increases the chance of the answer you get back being corrupt. I would go so long that we shouldn't call things a user interview. It should call the user monologue, because that's what you want it to be. You want the user to empty themselves out for the problem space that you're trying to solve for them. And everything you say increases the chances of the answer getting back being not the true thing. So please, shut the fuck up. Your job is to listen, not to talk. Then there was a description of a girl called Linda, who is deeply concerned about issues of social justice. There's a 2-sentence description of her, and I asked you to pick a category that was most probable to describe her. And one group got 7 categories to pick from. I don't know the answer here, but I know which alternative is absolutely not the right answer. And for those who didn't get the chance to answer, you can think in your head now what you would say. And if you picked the last option, works in IT and an active feminist, that is absolutely the wrong answer. I don't know what the right answer is, but it's certainly not that one. Because if she works in IT and is a feminist, she's 2 things at the same time. This is basic probability, right? She needs to be in that red field. That red field will always be smaller than just 1 yellow circle. Being 2 things at the same time is always less probable than being 1 thing. Always. So I don't know the right answer, but it certainly isn't that she works in IT and is an active feminist. So let's see what you guys answered. Poof! Wow. That is a lot higher than usually is. Almost 9 out of 10 of you answered the absolute least probable alternative when I asked you for the most probable. And I expected that. That's how the human brain works. So again, I divided it into two groups. So the other group didn't get 7 categories, they got 2. I tried to force you to think about this. Are you able to see the mistake you're about to make, or will you still fall for it? And let's see what that group did. 84. A little bit less, but still way much higher. It should be 0. If you know probability, that should be 0. So what happens here? When your brain does a decision, representativeness dominates. And our decisions are very often based on believability, not probability. I don't think any one of you wants to do that, but you do it. In psychology, this is called a conjunction fallacy. Sorry. So if we wind back, let's talk about Linda again. So when she works in IT, based on the description that I got to you, that's plausible and probable. When I add that she's also a feminist, that's more believable. It's more plausible to you, but it is less probable. It will always be less probable. If we do another example, I'm a designer. Let's say I have a friend whose name is Ella, and she's a designer. That's all you know about Ella. That's plausible and probable to you right now. If I add that she also walks to work, that's equally plausible because you don't know shit about Ella, but it is less probable. Logic and probability is not the same thing. Logic deals with truth and inference, and probability deals with uncertainty. Just because a story is coherent and makes sense does not make it probable. It makes it believable. And probable is not the same as plausible. Yet your brain constantly falls for this all the time. Then I asked you to donate some money to help us save some birds. And I divided you into two groups. One group should save 2,000 birds, and the other group should save 20,000 birds. Logically, saving 20,000 birds should be worth more than saving 2,000 birds, right? So let's see what the average donation sum would be. Oh, wow. Wow, this is very high. 491 kroner to save 2,000 birds on average. Damn, is this like a birding convention? Like, it's usually around 100 kroner. Or do you make a lot of money up here in Trondheim? What is happening? Now I'm very curious about the group for 20,000 birds. The average there was 513 kroner, even more. But not a lot more, which is odd. In fact, it's a 4% donation difference for 900% asking difference. There are 900% more birds, but you're only willing to donate 4% more money to save them. So what is happening there? I'm exposing you to what in psychology is called a mental prototype. Because your brain cannot process 20,000 birds. It's too much for a human brain. Even 2,000 doesn't work. So what the brain does is that it makes a prototype of these 20 birds. It picks out one bird, and you look at that one bird. So the people who answered this question all saw the same bird and then thought, how much money would I give to save that one bird? Even though technically it was 20,000, you saw one bird in your brain. In this case, a helpless bird soaked in oil, right? But the number of birds made very little difference on how much money you would like to donate. And in fact, we get the same results if you ask for 200,000 birds. It's too much for your brain to comprehend. Then I asked you to set a price for a used dinnerware set. We're going to sell it on Finn or something. And I divide you into 3 groups for this question. One group got this description. There were 24 pieces, and the other group had 7 extra pieces. The same 24, but 7 extra. 6 cups and 1 saucer. And I asked you, what price would you set for this? And the average price for the small group was 319 kroner, and the large group was 402 kroner. That makes sense. Good. That's, in fact, it's 26% higher price for larger sets. 29% would have been perfect. But 26, I'll accept that. That's linear. This is how we want the world to be. If you add more stuff, the price increases. Makes perfect sense. Really good. But the third group had the exact same dinnerware set as the middle group here. But I threw in some trash into the description of it. So it has the same 31 good pieces, but I added 9 broken ones into there. I tried to make this set look bigger. There are 40 pieces in this set. 9 of them are broken, but there's 40 pieces. I fluffed it up, tried to make it like bigger and better than it actually was. But it is the exact same set as the large group. And let's look at the average price that you set for this. That was, oh wow, it's less than a smaller group. Oh, now I'm really curious if my presentation can handle that, because that hasn't happened before. Let's see how good I am at coding. So that means that it's a 41% lower price for the exact same thing. Because I added unnecessary information to the description of it. I added some shit to it. Some unnecessary stuff. I tried to fluff it up to make it look bigger. And you guys said when you do that, you lower the price with 41%. So we zoom back a bit, and let's use the small group as a baseline here. That has 24 pieces, and you set this price for that. And then we add 7 good pieces to it, and the price increases with 26%. Makes sense. Let's use the same baseline of 24 pieces. Let's add the 7 good ones, but also add some unnecessary broken shit into it. And now the price decreases with 25%. It's the same thing. But you guys say that when you do this, you decrease the value at 41%. I don't say that, you said that. Which means that when you go back to your workplace and you add unnecessary stuff and try to fluff up your app or your product or whatever the hell you're building, you're decreasing the value at 41%. Less is more. And this happens because when your brain does an evaluation, the average dominates. And especially when I ended the description with something of lower standard, you lower the overall impression of it. And we do this all the time. We confuse people when we interview them, when we set up a UI or a newsletter or a form or whatever the hell we're doing. You add stuff to it, and when you do that, we decrease the value of it. Stop doing it. So this is basically cut the crap, right? And we've been saying cut the crap for as long as I've been alive. Clearly doesn't work, because you guys clearly still fluff up your apps. So I'm going to introduce a new thing now. Instead of saying cut the crap, we should say fuck your fluff. Fuck it straight to hell. Stop fluffing up your thing. It decreases the value. It does not add value at all. You said that. You clearly said that. And this one is my favorite. It sometimes doesn't work at all. Sometimes it works really well. And I'm curious now. There is no trickery at all in this. Everybody got the exact same thing. I wanted you to type one letter to make an English word. That's it. And I wanted one group to write soap and the other group to write soup. And let's see what the soap group did. Oh, 96%. Wow. Somebody wrote a 2. Somebody is working in QA or something here, trying to test my thing. So I allow anything in here just to see what you guys wrote, and also you can prove that it's real. And in the soup group, way less, but still 3 out of 4 wrote the letter that I want you to write. And somebody writes somp? What the hell is a somp? Okay, this is statistically significant, right? Even 74% is way more than it should have been if this was random. I influenced you. And everybody got the exact same question here. But there was a difference in the last question about the dinnerware set, where we learned that if you add unnecessary information, you confuse people. Because in the description of that dinnerware set, if you were in the soap group, it said that the dinnerware was washed and clean. If you were in the soup group, it said the dinnerware was good for eating hot dinners. So in the question before, I exposed you to these words that your brain associate with soap and with soup. And then afterwards, when I ask you to type one letter, your brain is already thinking about soap. And you type the A or the U, depending on which group you were in. So here, on average, about 85% of you were possibly primed. In psychology, this is called the priming effect. It's the basis of all advertisements, right? This affects our perception, our judgments, and our behaviors. And it happens unconsciously. None of you knew I did that to your brain when I did it, right? But I clearly did. The results are very, very clear. And this shows how complex our brains process information to make decisions. Because our engagement, facial expressions, words, body language, even location matters. It influences you all the time. And we, as tool builders and product builders, we can use this to steer people. You can prime somebody in an early stage of a flow for something they will do later. And we should be aware of how we involuntarily prime people when we talk to them, because the words you pick might influence them in a way that they are not prepared for. Because thinking can be tweaked. I clearly tweaked the thinking of some of you who were able to finish this. Then we had a question about a teddy bear machine. What is required to answer this question is the same brain process that is required to answer the lily pad question. This is a bit cryptic for those who didn't read the questions, but let's go with it. Everybody got the same 2 questions, but you got one question on an easy-to-read interface and one on a really hard-to-read interface. Good design and bad design. The function is the exact same thing. Everybody got each question, one easy and one hard. Good design, bad design. And let's see how many people answered correctly on this very basic math question that my 9-year-old daughter answers correctly, just to set the baseline there. So on the good design, the easy to read design, there were, Again, my 9-year-old daughter answers this correctly, but apparently only a third of you answers this basic math problem correctly. I don't think I've had lower than 29 before. That's incredible. Okay, but this should still work, I hope. So that's the good design, right? And then the other group got the exact same question, the exact same function, but it was really difficult to read the question. And they answered, oh, wow, 96! Holy shit. Wow, I gotta look at the data afterwards. That's astonishing. Okay, I love doing these experiments because I've done it now many, many times. And I know when you get to this question, because when you guys sit and you answer this question and you get to this hard to read thing, everybody does this. You squint your eyes and you move the phone closer to your face. And that's a sort of a clue to why people answer more correctly on the shitty design here. And I'm a designer. I worked as a designer for 17 years, and I'm not saying you should all go back to your workplace and make your apps really shitty, but even though this says 2.1 and 3.3 times better on shitty design. Because these tests are called, in psychology, a cognitive reflection test. They're there to measure how you make decisions. Do you go with your gut feeling, or do you stop and activate the slow system 2 thinking of your brain? Are you actually thinking about the problem, or are you just going with your reflexes? Because these puzzles, they evoke an answer that is intuitive, appealing, and wrong. When you just read it, you have a number immediately. It's the wrong one. And if you don't activate your brain, you answer that, right? And it requires hard work to override that thing. And that's what happened with the shitty design. Because you had to squint your eyes, you moved the thing, you read it more closely. You focused more when you read that on the shitty design, and that made your brain work harder and helped you overcome your gut feeling and actually answered correctly. Now, when we build things, we tend to focus on the function, and the function is the most important thing, but here, the function was the exact same thing, and I changed the form, and I made you answer 3.3 times more often correctly. So we shouldn't ignore form, because form fuels function. It's an incredibly powerful tool. Then we had this series of numbers, and I wanted you to try to find the rule for the next numbers in the sequence. And I gave you 2 attempts to try out your rule. And in the first test, people wrote, most of you wrote 6, some wrote 8, 16, and 75. Were 75, wow. That's really random. Okay, and then everybody got a thumbs up if you wrote this. And if you got a second attempt, what's the next number? 8, 16, and now somebody is working in QA, clearly here. It's testing my system and trying to make it break. So clearly it didn't, but AVS broke it, but that's a different story. Okay, it's clear here that 2 patterns emerge, right? Most people wrote 6, 8, or 8, 16. And based on that, I can draw the conclusion that your hypothesis was that the rule is +2 or times 2. And that is a huge problem, because that means that 92% of you only looked for what you wanted to find, because the answer isn't +2 or times 2. So if you did this as a research for your app, you came home with the wrong answer, but you thought you were right. Because my form said thumbs up, yep, that number fits the pattern. But it would also have done that, so the rule was that numbers increase. There is no pattern of how they increase, they just increase. It's not +2, it's not times 2, it's just more. Which means that if you wrote these numbers, you would get a thumbs up. Yep, that fits the rule, this fits the rule, this does not fit the rule. When you tried a 5 there, a lower number, you would have gotten a thumbs down saying, no, that breaks the rule. 92% None of you did that. And that's a huge problem. It's also very expected because this is confirmation bias. It's the strongest bias in the human brain. So what happens here is that you had a hypothesis and you see confirmation that you were right. And the feedback that the form gave you was, yep, this fits the rule. Didn't say the rule was right, it fits the rule. But you were wrong. And you only asked, am I right? None of you asked, am I wrong? Which is a much more powerful question that you can learn so much more from than am I right? And this happens because when we believe something, we search for information that supports it, we are less critical of that information, we spend more time on it, we interpret that in that direction. Sorry. And, oh, it's slow again. So what happens is that your brain is super lazy. We're an animal, and we're an animal through evolution that is trying to survive. And your brain is really bad at seeing things it did not expect to see, and it's too eager to see what it wants to see. Your brain will take every shortcut it can every single time. Because your brain is lazy. It conserves energy. It will take all the shortcuts it can because it doesn't know the next survival mode. Somebody's going to need to wake up. And then there was a description of Jane, and she lost her wallet in New York, and that description of Jane was one sentence long. And after you read that sentence, I asked you to summarize what happened to Jane. And you got 3 alternatives. And there are many reasons to lose your wallet in New York. It could have been slipped out of your pocket, it could have left at a restaurant or an Uber. There are a million reasons to lose your wallet. But none of them were specified in the one sentence you read. So the only true alternative here is that she explored sites. The other ones did not say that in that one sentence. And let's see what you guys answered. 60% of you summarized one sentence wrong, a second after you read it. She was not pickpocketed. It did not say that in that one sentence at all. But your brain did something when you saw New York, crowded streets, lost wallet, somebody took it. Didn't say that. This is the world's most popular sport. It's jumping to conclusions. And that's what you did there. In psychology, it's called associative coherence. So seeing causes and intentions makes us jump to conclusion, and you get to the wrong conclusion because you do it too quickly. Now, I worked as a designer for 17 years now. I've seen people do this again and again and again. So I'm going to show you 3 slides now that you can read internally in your head, and then we'll discuss this afterwards. So here's the first slide. And here's the second slide. And in your brain now, Mary is probably a bit stressed, right? Nobody goes to the bank for fun. I'm sorry for the bank people in the crowd, but something has happened when you go to the bank. It's not a positive thing. You need a loan or something wrong is going on. It's about money. She's stressed. But if I add more context to this, like now, Mary is in a happy place, right? When you get the full context of what is happening to Mary, I changed the meaning of the word bank. It's now a river bank, and she's now happy. She's out canoeing with her friends, and it's a sunny, nice day. I completely changed what happened to Mary. And here's the third slide. And most of you read that as 12, 13, 14 now. And in the beginning, you read that as A, B, C. But that middle character is the exact same character. First, you read it as a B, and then as a 13. And this affects our decision because recent events and current context has the most weight when you interpret something. And your brain here makes a definitive choice, and you're not even aware of it. It's only one interpretation that comes to mind, and you're not really aware that there were other ways of interpreting things, because your brain doesn't keep track of the things that it rejects, or even that there were something that was rejected. Because context affects us always. And we will believe an idea that makes sense to us, even if we made it up ourselves, just because it fits with what we understand of the world. And there's a research where they gathered a bunch of single people And they divided into two groups, and they asked them two questions. First question was, how happy are you these days? And the second question was, how many dates did you have last month? And then they crunched the numbers, and there was close to zero correlation between these two questions. How happy you are and how many dates you've been on the last month has nothing to do with each other. They're separate things. And then they took the other group of single people, and they asked them the same two questions in a different order. How many dates did you have last month? How happy are you these days? They crunched numbers, and now it's as high as correlations gets. These two questions are deeply connected. Same target group, same two questions, different sequence. You get a completely different result. So what happens here? Well, the question about the romantic life, it's a number. It's a number. You're asking how many dates did you go on, but that number comes with a bunch of feelings. Maybe you're very happy because it's high, or maybe you're very sad because it's low. It doesn't really matter, but that feeling sticks around in your brain when you're then asked, how happy are you? But if you ask how happy you are first, you get a different answer because you evoked something in your brain. In psychology, this is called the halo effect. And it's really strong. And the sequence that you learned something in matters. And usually the first thing you learned is the strongest with you. So it's not just context, it's also sequence. And sequence is very often just chance. It's random. It's random what you learned first about a problem. But the first thing you learned sticks around much longer and harder in your brain. And the halo effect is so strong that very often, whatever you learn afterwards doesn't really matter because you stick to that first thing that you learned. Context changes comprehension. Then my favorite one is there's a new virus in town, and you need to pick a program to fight it. And everybody got the same two outcomes to pick from. One group got a safe option one option was a safe one with a low survival rate, and the other one was a risky option with a high survival rate. Everybody had these same two things to pick from. Yet I wanted one group to not take the risk, and the other group to take the risk. And a question of life and death. And let's see what the people answered. 1 out of 5 took the risk where I didn't want you to take the risk, and where I want you to take the risk, 90% took it. Think about that. This is a question about life and death for you, your family, and your neighbors, and I can affect how willing you are to take a risk in that situation. And how did I do that? Because everybody had the same two outcomes to pick from, but I used different words to describe them. So where I didn't want you to take the risk, I phrased it as you're saving people. 200 people will be saved. And the other group, it's 400 people will die. There are only 600 people in this problem. That's the same outcome. 200 people being saved, 400 dying, it's the same thing. But you don't want people to die. So when I phrase it as people are dying, you are more willing to take a risk than if I phrase it as people are being saved. In fact, in this case, it's 4.5 times more risk tolerant. For the exact same thing, I just chose a different frame, different words to describe the exact same thing. Framing matters. And we set the frame. We choose the words in our products. And communication is not about what you're saying, it's what the other person is understanding. And I changed your understanding of risk by choosing different words. Because words create this frame around reality, and those words are included when you make an assessment. So the human brain can't assess something objectively. It needs a description of it. And that description is also included when you make the assessment. Like in this example from research where they showed a bunch of people a video of a car crashing into a wall. And they asked them this question: how fast was the car going when they collided? And that group, on average, answered 50 kilometers per hour. The other group saw the exact same video and were asked, how fast was the car going when it crashed? And their average was 65 kilometers per hour. Same video, one word difference increased the perceived speed with 30%. Because crash is a harder, faster word than collided. Words build worlds. And you can change your world by changing your words. I also asked who should get access to your answers when we're done here. And these were the options they were given in 2 different groups. Do you see the difference that the 2 groups were given? There's a black dot in one of them. So one group had a default pre-selected for you, and the other one had a completely free choice. And in the free choice, none of you picked everybody at TDC. Wow, that's astonishing to me. Oh, and none of you, everybody moved. Wow! What happened to sharing is caring? Holy shit. That's amazing. Usually, the default group selects the default way more often. In this case, I'm guessing this is one of the last questions, and maybe not a lot of people finished it. Maybe that's what happened here. But this is the power of defaults. And the example there is organ donation. If you go to a country like Austria and Sweden, the number of citizens who are willing to donate their organs is sky high. Austria is the top of the world. But if you cross the border to a neighboring country with a similar culture, similar language, to Germany and Denmark, that number plummets. I don't mean to offend anyone from Germany or Austria, but to me, that's the same country. It's more or less the same thing, but it's not if you need an organ. It certainly isn't. And the difference here is in the default. It's the word not in a form. Because in Austria and Sweden, you are an organ donor by default, and you have to say, I don't want to be. And in Germany and Denmark, you are not an organ donor, you have to say, I want to be. And that not word in that form makes it 21 times more organ donors in a neighboring country with a similar culture. It's literally life-saving. And speaking of default behaviors, when you scan the QR code, you came to this, for those that worked, I came to this landing page. It says quickly what we're going to do here. There's a button to get started. Underneath there's terms, conditions, and privacy policy. And that's a contract that the people who click the button accepted. And then it will be interesting to see, that 8 of you actually read it. That's amazing. 400% is definitely wrong, but 8 of you, something is off here. 8 of you read the terms and conditions. That's amazing. Usually nobody does. If you did, this would have happened. First of all, I would congratulate you for actually doing the right thing. Then the legal stuff that lawyers helped me write, and underneath there, you now owe me a beer. So legally, everybody here owes me a beer, and I'll get shit-faced tonight. Everybody click that button. Defaults direct decisions. It clearly does, right? I also asked you if you thought there would be a giraffe question in this survey. And no matter what you answered, you were right. If you answered yes, you got a question about giraffe. If you said no, you didn't get one. And then I asked you, how confident are you in that you will get or not get a question? And then at the end, I threw some confetti at you and said, oh my God, you're amazing. You were right. I can't believe you knew that. How did you know? And then I asked you, do you remember how confident you were in the beginning? And then, none of you significantly increased. So again, I'm sure none of you actually did this. Did anyone do this? Raise of hand. There is 3 people. Okay, good. Nice. Usually, a lot of people change their minds here. You misremember because I say you're amazing. And then I talk you up, and that makes you think you're better than you actually are, and you change your perception of yourself. It's called hindsight bias, or I knew it all along effect. Everything makes sense in hindsight, right? And we tend to overestimate how much we understand about the world and underestimate the role of chance in events. It makes you think you're a superhero, or somehow somebody else has a superpower, and they don't. Nobody does. A leader who takes a crazy gamble and wins, he's a hero. But he's not a hero, he's lucky. A leader who takes the exact same action, a crazy gamble, and doesn't win, he's a loser. But he took the exact same action as the guy who got lucky. So judging something in hindsight is bullshit. We should stop doing that. Like in the Champions League final of 2008, it's Manchester United playing against Chelsea. It's 1-1 at full time. Extra time is 1-1. It goes to penalty shootout, and Champions League will be decided on one kick of the ball. And that kick of the ball is Cristiano Ronaldo, and he does this. And before he took that penalty, the question was, who should take that penalty? And the answer was, of course, it's Cristiano Ronaldo. At the time, he's the best player in the world. He had an amazing season. He's young, he's eager, he's never won a Champions League. He wants this. He must take this penalty. And then he did that. And of course, Cristiano Ronaldo shouldn't have taken that penalty. He's too young, he's inexperienced. He had a good season, but he had a bad day that day. He didn't play a good game. He's bad at taking penalties. There's all these reasons why he shouldn't have taken that. So all of a sudden, the opinion about this changes. It's an outcome bias. It makes you think that a stupid decision is smart just because it worked out. It's not. A stupid decision is stupid no matter what it works out or not. Or the case of Cristiano Ronaldo, it was smart that he took that penalty, even though he was unlucky and didn't score. He was the most suited candidate to do that. Hindsight is bullshit. We need to stop doing that now. You can't learn anything from it. Then he had a question if you wanted some sugary stuff when we're done here, after the survey, some candy. And again, I rigged the survey, so I'm sorry to lying to the people who actually managed to finish it. No matter what you answered, I said that almost everybody else answered the opposite of you. So if you said, I want candy, I said, nobody else wants candy, so we should probably save some time and not do that. And half of you changed your mind from peer pressure. You wanted to fit into the bigger group. It's herd mentality bias. So social influence leads us to conform to the majority. And we will follow the group even if you know that it's not good for you. Like if you wanted candy, you're not getting candy because I lied to you and said nobody else wants candy. So we're going to skip this final thing because I'm sure AWS is going to fail me again. So this will be a bit different. Let's see if my website works here. So the first bias that we reviewed was the anchoring effect, where I influenced your answer with 86%. And what I wanted to do now, but I'm sure it won't work, so we're not going to spend time on it, is ask you how many African countries are there in the United Nations? Now, before I asked you that, I also asked you for the last 2 digits of your phone number. So you can think about your last 2 digits of your phone number, puts you in one of these 3 groups. And then think about how many countries there are in Africa. And what happens, usually, is that the people with a high phone number answer a very high number of countries. And the people with low number answer a very low number of countries. And there cannot be a connection between our phone numbers and how many countries there are in Africa. It just can't. But when I do this experiment, it does every single time. Unfortunately, we're not going to spend time doing that now. So this, you can see, it doesn't work because nobody did it. What happens there is that you're sort of anchoring yourself. Because there I first ask you about your phone number, so you provide your own anchor, and then you're still thinking about that high number. So this works even now when we've talked about this for 56 minutes. You're hyper-aware of biases. You were exposed to the same effect. I acted as slow thinker by thinking about the last 2 digits of phone number, not the first 2 digits. You provide your anchor yourself. I didn't do anything. And yet, people fall for it here. Your brain can trick itself all by itself. You don't even really have to do anything. It just falls for these biases all by itself on autopilot. So this experiment here, it works. And it works not because you guys are dumb, but because you're human. We are all the same animal. The human brain works in a certain way. It has its faults. It's flawed by nature. And you can exploit that. And the world in our heads is not a precise replica of reality. So what you think about the world is not exactly what it is. You interpret everything through all of your senses all of the time. So you can easily be primed. That's why advertisement works, right? I primed you guys. I anchored you guys. I used all these biases to affect your brain into the direction that I wanted you to go. And we're blind to this. We're blind to the obvious. We're also blind that we're blind. Which makes for interesting surveys. Like 90% of car drivers believe they're better than average. It's not possible. They did the same survey at hospitals where they asked people who were just in a car crash and it was their fault, and the answer is still 90% says, yes, I'm better than the average. When you just crashed. So we can't exempt ourselves from this research. None of us can. It's impossible. There are many people who have tried to train your brain to not fall for these biases. None of them have been successful. So we need to be aware of them and try to recognize situations where mistakes are likely to happen when you build your products or your apps or whatever you're doing. And it's important for me to say that I haven't tricked or fooled anyone. I've held up a mirror, right? I know stuff about the human brain, and I know some traps that I set up for you that you fell into. I didn't trick you. I held up a mirror and showed you how your own brain works. It's not magical. It's psychological. And we tend to exempt ourselves from results that surprise us. And that's the basis of most of this, is out of a research paper where they talked to psychology students, and they all said when they were finished graduating, said that people are batshit crazy, but I'm not. I'm special because I'm a psychologist now. I have learned about this. So this is about you, it's not about me. And how they managed to get the psychology students to learn that it's also about them because they're also human was to expose them to these biases, like I've done here. And whenever I've done this experiment, there's usually one person that comes to me afterwards and is pissed off at me. It's always an older man, unfortunately. And he says, oh, I answered what you wanted me to do, but I did it because I wanted to, not because you influenced me. All right, sure, maybe. And none of these examples were 100%, right? It doesn't work every time, but it works every time statistically significant. It works more than it should be if it was random. And this experiment is not perfect. It's leaning on AVS, which is a huge mistake today. And I'm really sorry about this. This is usually a lot more smooth, and I'll happily come to your workplace and do this experiment for you on a day where AVS actually is running. But the research behind this is solid. Most of this was started by a guy called Daniel Kahneman. He won a Nobel Prize for this research. It's been proven again and again globally over many decades. It's not 100%, but it is enough that we should know about it. And I clearly can influence you guys about it. Because the secret ingredient that is fucking up our decisions is our brain. And we should know our brain well enough to not trust it. You can't trust your own brain. So the people who actually finished fell for, on average, 7 of these illusions. There were 15 in total. So on average, most of you fell for a lot of them. And we'll skip these parts too. For those who still works, you can open up your phone now, and there will be a page where you can add your email, and I'll send you a link with a book, a recap of everything we talked about, really nice summaries, including sources and your own results. So I'll finish off by saying that you can easily manipulate others. Even if you don't even mean to do that. Just by saying a number, we've seen that you can anchor them to saying a high number as well, right? So when you talk to your users and your customers, you need to be very aware of which words you're using. Because even though you mean to, you can involuntarily manipulate people into giving an answer they didn't want to give. But more importantly, that you can easily manipulate, you are easily manipulated. So everybody who finished this, I manipulated all of you. None of you fell for 0, right? So please remember that when you read the news or scroll through social media apps that are literally designed to exploit all of these biases, to make your brain rot. You should be critical of your own decisions and your own sources, and free Palestine. Thank you very much.